If there's one thing that every single one of us wrestles with at some point in our health journey, it is excuses. Maybe you call them reasons or roadblocks, but whatever you call them, they all boil down to the same question. How do I make this work for me? And the truth is that the results you want require change. Change is hard. But hard does not mean impossible. So let's dive into this idea of getting honest with yourself, confronting your excuses, and finding your way forward, because staying stuck just is not an option. Welcome to the Hey Steph podcast. I'm Steph. I'm a holistic nutritionist and an eating psychology coach, and I'm super excited to have you here today with me. This podcast is the place where I help you implement long-term lasting behavior change to feel better in your body. So this episode, I had planned something else for today's episode, but I got a question from someone on Instagram, actually someone who's in my Anchor Down course where I talk about the 5 habits that changed my life. And she reached out after watching the course videos, and I got her permission to use her question because after I answered her, then I continued to mull over it and think about it. And I thought, I have actually more to say on this topic. And so I asked her if I could use her story, her experience, her question as a jumping off point for a podcast episode. And she said yes. So I'm grateful to her, you know who you are, for letting me use this question because it really resonated with me. And I feel like there's some really common struggles embedded in this question that I am really excited to unpack. So I'm going to read her question. Okay, she says, I have a question about food tracking. I am a caterer and a baker, and I'm tasting food all day long just to make sure things taste right for our catering events. How would you recommend I go about tracking that? That always seems to be my biggest hang up when I start tracking food. Well, that, and I don't use recipes when I cook for my family. I just throw things together. I know how to get the calorie counts for that. It's just very time consuming. Okay. I mean, basic question, right? But maybe it seems like there's nothing mind-blowing in there. But what I found that I kept coming back to is that her challenge is unique, and also it's not. In a lot of ways, the circumstances might be a little bit different, but it's ultimately the same challenge that all of us faced. It's just dressed up in her specific circumstances. And what she's asking is, how do I make this work in my life with my obstacles and my routines and my personality and my job and my family? And I think we all have to figure that out. So these challenges are valid. The first point I want to touch on is that tasting food all day as a caterer or a baker does present a really unique challenge to tracking food, which is a behavior that I encourage people to try. And one of the things that I dive into a lot more in depth in my Anchor Down course. No one is saying that that is easy. And I gave her a couple strategies mainly, and I think the one that we kind of landed on was for her to build in a little bit of a cushion calorically to account for those extra, we call them BLTs, bites, licks, and tastes. And it's things that are really hard, impossible to track. You're not going to be like, let me lick this spoon and measure it. That would be insane. And those are going to add up, right? So that could end up making a big difference. So it is tricky. The main thing that I really loved about her question was her situation with her family. I don't use recipes when I cook. I just throw things together. It's time consuming. And here's the really sticky truth about tracking your food specifically, but about behavior change in general, is that changing your behavior requires changing your behavior. Which might seem obvious, but behavior change requires behavior change. We cannot stay the same and expect different results. So I get 100% that we get into routines and habits around food preparation, grocery shopping, cooking, meal planning. We're probably in a groove to some degree in that we just have the way we do things. And I get that. And also, if it's not working for you, then we have to get honest with ourselves and confront that. We cannot stay the same. We cannot continue doing what we have been doing and expect something different to come from it. So I want to give kind of a gentle call out here. I want to normalize excuses, and we all have them. We all have reasons why it's harder for us than it might be for someone else. It might be being a busy mom and having kids, 1 kid, 8 kids, it doesn't matter. Kids are hard. It might be having a demanding job, being a mom and having a demanding job. There might be unpredictable circumstances. Your life might be in flux for some reason. I mean, the list of excuses, and I'm going to use the word excuses, not in a negative way, but just, I guess, barriers or roadblocks to change. We all have those. And it's really easy to point to our unique challenges and say, this right here is the reason why I can't follow through. Implementing behavior change or implementing this particular habit that I want to do is hard or maybe even impossible for me because of X, Y, and Z. I get it. And I don't want to discount that those challenges are real and they are valid. I'm not here to dismiss your obstacles. But the truth is that every single person who has ever made progress had to overcome obstacles too. They just chose to stop letting those obstacles dictate their actions. They chose to potentially make the harder choice to swim upstream for a while, to change old ingrained behaviors and habits and patterns in order to choose something better, even though it's not easy. Yes, it requires a time commitment. One of the things I said to this person was that it's going to, change in any form is going to require a time commitment. I cannot pretend, and no one who's trying to help people change their lives can pretend that it's easy or that it's quick, or you just do these couple quick things and boom, there you go, your life is changed. Change is so hard. That's literally the point. If it wasn't hard, we would have already done it, and being healthy would be easy. It would be effortless, and it's just not. There are no hacks. There are no shortcuts. Living a healthy lifestyle is hard work every single day, day in, day out. I cannot sugarcoat that. Is it going to get easier? Absolutely. But if you're not willing to put in that big thrust on the front end of what do I need to do, what do I need to figure out in order to make this happen, you're going to stay stuck. I do think that healthy behaviors build momentum. And that's one of the amazing things that I have found, that when you get into a routine, when your patterns are now built around healthy behaviors, instead of your patterns being unhealthy behaviors, you are so much more freed up mentally and emotionally to just execute, like I talked about in the episode last week, where you build these systems, you build these habits, you set a standard for yourself. It does get easier, but it's never effortless. It's not supposed to be, and I'm sorry if that's disappointing. This is hard, and it's so absolutely worth it. So what our excuses often boil down to is this idea of, I want to change, but I don't want to change. I want the results, but I don't want to do the uncomfortable work to get them. And I think the biggest barrier here is not your time or your kids or your job. It's your mindset. I really think that's the biggest barrier between you and your goals. And I would encourage you to get honest with yourself. If what you're doing right now is working for you, great. Don't change anything. But if you're not happy with where you are, and this could mean with your habits, with your weight, with your eating patterns, with your sleep, with your exercise, there's a lot of ways to change. And if you're not happy with the way you're doing it, you need to ask yourself, what am I willing to do differently? Where am I holding myself back? And what excuses am I making to stay in my comfort zone? I'm going to talk for a minute about going into a calorie deficit. I'm just going to give a trigger warning here. I'm talking about calories and I'm talking about quote unquote dieting. But I want to use this to drive this point home. A couple months ago, I had this realization. It's not groundbreaking, but it was to me at the time. And I realized the only thing holding me back was me. And for some reason, at this particular day, I had this insight. I mean, it just felt like it dropped into my brain like a light bulb. And I was like, okay, I am so ready to go all in. I was in a really good place where I had a specific time period that I was like, I'm going to go into one fat loss phase for this year. and I'm going to hit it hard, and I'm going to stop making excuses, and I'm just going to do it. And it ended up being a transformational experience physically, but also emotionally. And I've had this experience before where I amaze myself, which sounds really prideful, but I amaze myself at what I'm able to accomplish when I just commit and I follow through. Like, I blow my own mind. I'm like, whoa, was I capable of that all along? And I've just been not doing it? Yes, that's exactly what it is. I am the one holding myself back. And those excuses that we make get really comfortable and they feel totally valid and maybe insurmountable. Like, well, this is just the way I do it. This is just the way I cook. This is just the way I eat. I eat out 6 times a week. That's just how my life is. Well, is that working for you? I would venture to guess that it's not. I mean, no one's perfect. We all have room for growth and change, and all of us have habits and behaviors that are not the ideal, which is not a bad thing. I think one of the beauties of life and one of the things that I love is constantly striving to be better, to be more. It might be like an unhealthy addiction, but, and it's like buried deep inside of my DNA. I come from a family of strivers, and it just lights me up to do those types of things. But I feel like it shouldn't be discouraging to realize I'm always going to need to get better. I think it's exciting. Like, what am I capable of? And it's so fun to surprise yourself and to realize, whoa, I'm awesome. Like, I could do that. I did it. I said I was going to do it. I followed through and I did it. And wow, that feels so good. So for this listener, this woman who asked this question, I kind of went into this a little bit, and obviously that's why I wanted to do a podcast episode on it, because it was like a 2-minute voice message on Instagram. But I suggested putting in an investment of time up front. It could be, okay, this is not working for me. And she did confirm to me that what she was doing was not working for her. So I threw out a couple options. You could just have a throw together meal for your family, and you could cook a separate one for yourself where you measure. You could sit down and be like, what are the, 10, 15, even 20 meals that my family likes that I make pretty consistently, and take an hour or 2 or 3, I don't know how long it will take, and plug those into your food tracking app so that you have a little bit of a margin when it comes to you get in the kitchen and you're actually logging the food that you are eating. You've done some of the legwork ahead of time of knowing what's in that meal, what is the nutritional composition of that meal, what it's doing for your body. I think that's good data to have, and it requires a time investment up front. So yes, you taking out a kitchen scale, measuring the ingredients, maybe all at once, maybe once a week or twice a week, saving those recipes in your app to reuse later. Yeah, all of that takes effort, but that's the work of change. That's what change requires. It requires doing something differently. You cannot always change your circumstances. Obviously, this is the case, but I do believe that you can always change your response. You can find ways to make things work for you, even if it is very messy or imperfect at first, or maybe always. Getting healthy and implementing healthy habits, even tracking your food, even something as data-driven and precise and maybe meticulous as tracking your food, is not about perfection. It's about being willing to adapt, to experiment, and to keep going, to keep trying, even when it feels inconvenient. It's about trading excuses for solutions, because that's really where progress lives. The bottom line is that no one is going to hand you the life that you want. No one is going to give you a healthy body. No one's going to hand you a set of habits. You have to build it. Day in and day out, hour by hour, decision by decision, plate by plate. And that means getting really honest with yourself about where you are holding yourself back and being willing to make changes even when it feels hard. It will absolutely feel hard. Like, there's no way to change that. Change is hard. And you should do it anyway. And it's worth it. So I like to give you some action steps at the end of every episode that you can take today, hopefully, or now, to help you implement what I've talked about in the episode. So here are my 3 action steps to take today. The first option here for an action step is to write down one excuse that is holding you back right now. Get really honest with yourself. What is the story you're telling yourself about why you can't move forward? What patterns or habits or behaviors or situations are you in that maybe you feel like this is just the way things are and this is how my life is, but if you step back and be honest and look at it objectively, you realize that there might be something you're contributing to the situation that you do have the power to change. So that might take some reflection, journaling. I prefer to talk, so I like to talk to someone about this. That's a great option as well. But figure out an excuse that's holding you back. And then the second action step, which obviously goes with that one, is to brainstorm what you can do to overcome it. What's one solution or workaround you can try? So like this person who asked the question, she said, I'm leaning towards meal planning and tracking while leaving a buffer and see how that goes. I feel like that was the perfect response. I'm going to try this. I'm thinking about doing this. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it goes. That is exactly the mindset to have around change. It's not going to be this is the new 10 commandments handed down on stone tablets and I have to do this forever. Try it. See what you think. Do you like it? You're brainstorming. You're coming up with creative solutions. This is so much more powerful than staying stuck in excuses and I can'ts and becauses. Just get creative. What are 20 ideas? How could I work around this? I find strength training to be really hard because of XYZ or A through Z, whatever it is. Okay, instead of listing out all the reasons you can't, list out a ton of ways you could or attempts you could make. There's so much power in just completely flipping on its head the approach in transitioning from excuses to creative solutions. And the third action step is to commit to doing the hard thing. Maybe you're listening and you already have an idea. You don't need to write down an excuse. You don't need to brainstorm. You already have a good idea. Commit to doing the thing. Decide right now that you're willing to step outside your comfort zone, even if it feels inconvenient or uncomfortable or imperfect. And by commit, this could mean a lot of different things. It could mean vocalizing this to someone, a partner, a friend, me. Feel free to message me on Instagram. I'd always love to hear about your commitments to yourself. It could mean making a checklist, a chart that is really motivating for me in periods of intense change, like the one I mentioned a few minutes ago. I make a chart for myself and every night I color off the bubble when I was successful. That is maybe childish and immature, and it really works for me. So maybe it's making a chart, maybe it's setting a timeline, maybe it's setting up a new system. I mean, sky's the limit here, but committing is a really important first step to change. And knowing that, like I talked about in that last episode, forecasting failure, if you are thinking ahead of how potentially this could go wrong, you'll be even more empowered to follow through and execute on your commitment to yourself. And that's ultimately what this is. It's a commitment to yourself. That's the only reason this matters. This is all for you. It's all about you. It's all for you. Yes, of course, we want to be healthy for those we love. We want to show up better for our kids. And I think the main thing is that it's so empowering to decide you're going to do something hard because you deserve the outcome and to follow through on it. I mean, there's just nothing in the world like that experience. I've had that through changing my eating patterns. I've had that through implementing strength training and getting stronger. It is a high that I can't even put into words. And it has built my confidence immeasurably. It has built my trust in myself, my appreciation for hard work, and my confidence in knowing that I can face hard things in the future because I've already done that. I've already done all these things that I can feel proud of. That doesn't have to end. There's more awesomeness to come. So that's it for today. I hope that feels helpful. If this episode hit home for you, I would always love to hear about it. You are welcome to DM me on Instagram. I'm there at HeyStephWebb. I'd love to hear about the excuses you're working to overcome, the commitments you're making, how you're finding a way forward. If you are ready to stop making excuses and start building habits that work for you and you want to go a little bit deeper, I'd invite you to join my course, Anchor Down, and I'll teach you step by step how to create the systems that make health easier to sustain in the 5 areas that have made the biggest difference for me, no matter what your circumstances look like. So if you head over to Instagram and comment the word anchor on any of my posts, it will send you the link. The little robot helper that I have will send you the link. Or you can always go to the URL stan.store/HeyStephWeb. That's STAN.STORE/HeySteph with a PH, web with two B's. All right, I appreciate you being here. I hope it has felt helpful for you, and I will talk to you next week.